folks in. So I'm going to disable the waiting room and we will let everyone in. And here they come. Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. Welcome. We have a lot of people who need to get logged on this evening. So to give them time to do that, I am going to go through some Zoom best practices with you, which will help you have a really great experience today. So like I said, we're going to give folks a couple more minutes to get logged on, and I'll just talk you through some information I'd like you to know about. So the very first thing I'd like to share with you is that you should be muted. And we ask that you keep yourself muted throughout the entire session. The reason that we ask that you keep yourself muted is it cuts down on any background noise and it improves the overall audio quality of the session for everyone. So please keep yourself muted. If you manage to unmute yourself, go to your taskbar. It's either at the top or the bottom of your screen. Go all the way to the left. You'll see what looks like a little picture of a microphone. It says mute. You just click on that and that will get you muted again. So please keep yourself muted throughout the presentation. All right, so I have a screen share up right now, and there are going to be a couple of times during tonight's session when I'm also going to be screen sharing again. When I do that, I'm going to make a recommendation for the best way to view the presentation, and that is to switch to what's called side-by-side mode. So if you go to the top of your screen, it's probably on the right side, it says view. If you click on that, you should get some options, and one of those options should be side-by-side mode. And what that'll do is it makes the slides a little bit smaller, but it pushes them to one side and allows your video feeds to go down the other so that you don't have video, the thumbnails on top of the slides, and it allows you to see the entire slide. So side-by-side mode is a recommendation that I would like to make. Next up is when we are not screen sharing. I always suggest that people switch to what's called speaker view. You can either be in gallery view or speaker view. Speaker view means that whoever is talking is nice and big at the bottom of your screen. You're able to focus on them. Otherwise, you're in gallery view, and that has all the little thumbnails, and it's kind of hard to see everybody. So it's always good to consider switching to speaker view. And again, that is up at the top in your view options. Next up, I would like you to find your chat. So go back to your taskbar and look kind of in the middle. It says chat. It's got what looks like a little text bubble above it. If you click on that, a window opens. You can grab that with your cursor and kind of drag it over to the side. And this is how we're going to communicate with one another today. So if you have a question you would like to ask or a comment you would like to make, we'd like you to type that into the chat. I'm going to put something in the chat right now so you can, it's some information that I'm going to go over in just a second. If you want to practice using the chat, feel free to say hello, tell us where you're joining us from. It's always interesting to see all the different folks who are here today. So again, any questions or comments, pop those into the chat. Next up, closed captioning is available on all Lewis Public Library Zoom presentations. You do have to have it enabled in your Zoom account. So if it is enabled, you can go to your taskbar. It's kind of over to the right. It should say closed caption with a little arrow pointing up. You click on that and you will get the option to show subtitles, and that will give you closed captioning for this session. All right, next up, we always encourage you to support our authors by purchasing a copy of their book, and we would love for you to purchase it from our local independent bookstore, Browse About Books, which is located in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Browse About Books is our partner in these virtual author events. They are what makes these events happen. They're what makes them free, so we would love for you to show some love for them by purchasing the book from them. If you purchase from them, it does come with a signed book plate, and also if you need it shipped to you, there is a $5 mailing fee, and that link is in the chat. All links that are in the chat I will send out to you afterwards by email, so don't worry about having to click on anything in the chat right now. You'll get a chance later on when I send you a follow-up email, but we would love for you to support the author and support Browse About by purchasing the book from there. You can also borrow a copy of the book from the Delaware Library System if you are in Delaware and you have a Delaware library card. I don't have the exact link quite yet for that book, but I did put the general link to the Delaware Library Catalog in the chat, and that book should be in the Delaware Library Catalog by the end of the week. And again, I will send a follow-up email with all of this information. Lewis Public Library runs a number of different virtual events, and we encourage you to visit our website and check out all the different offerings and sign up for them. We also have a page dedicated just to our upcoming virtual author events, and that link is in the chat. And we would love for you to join us for those. So with that, I'm going to take down this screen share. One second. Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Rebecca Lowe. I'm the Adult Program Coordinator with the Lewis Public Library. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're very happy to have you here. At this point, I would like to turn this over to our interviewer. And first, she really doesn't need introductions, because if you are an NPR listener and lover like I am, you know her name and you know who she is. But I'll go ahead and introduce her anyway. Lisa Mullins is the anchor of the NPR news program All Things Considered on WBUR in Boston. She's also a frequent guest anchor for NPR's Here and Now. For 14 years, Lisa anchored the international news program The World from PRI, WGBH, and the BBC. Her work has taken her to Morocco, Albania, China, South Africa, and North Korea. She regrets never having gone to Nepal, but like the ambassador we'll hear from tonight, she does have a dog. So with that, Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca, and it's so nice to see all your faces. Thank you for allocating your Zoom time to us, despite how much you allocated to others earlier in the day today. I was going to start off with an image of my dog, or actually the dog himself, but he's sleeping over there and I dare not wake him up. And also, he's not nearly as exotic as the ambassador's dog, as you'll come to find out, especially if you haven't read the book yet. So thank you again for being here. And I wonder if there are actually any children in the audience. I don't know if I can see any right now. I don't know if there are any hands raised, but I'm not going to change my setting. Well, you probably know kids if you aren't one yourself. And I can guarantee you this is a great book to be read to children. And I plan on reading it to my little neighbor as well later on. So let me tell you a little bit about the author, Scott DeLisi. He is the former US ambassador, not just to Nepal, where this story takes place, but also to Eritrea and Uganda. He's been a diplomat for 35 years and now lives in Virginia, consults at the State Department, and runs a charitable foundation that's called Engage Nepal. And as you'll hear, he tells this story from the book with such heart, but he is the first to say that it's not just the narrative of a book that has an impact, it is the visuals too. And that brings us to Jane Lillian Vance, who gets all the credit for the visual. She's a celebrated artist who also lives in Virginia, although in the mountains, and has planted deep roots in Nepal, in India, and Sri Lanka. She's a teacher, she's an art therapist and a mentor, and her style of artistry is unique, and you're going to be hearing just how thoughtfully she goes about creating her work. You get to see it as well for yourself in just a bit. So let's start with Ambassador DeLisi. Could you tell us about this place that captured your heart and your imagination as it has Jane Lillian Vance's? And I'd like the audience to think of this as like a mini Nepal 101 and what it was like to be a diplomat there.
All right, this will have to be really quick because we've got lots to talk about tonight. But first of all, thank you for being with us, Lisa. And thank you to our friends at Delaware Public Libraries and Browse About Books. You guys rock. And it's wonderful that you do programs like this. I think that these are fantastic, and I hope they'll continue even after the pandemic is done. Nepal captured my heart. The first time I went there was in 1982 when I was serving in Bombay, India. It was still Bombay in those days, and I was a young officer, and it was my first posting, and I traveled to Nepal. And it has stayed in my heart ever since. And now for those of you who don't know Nepal, perhaps we should help you place it in the world. I am sure that with this audience that you all are brilliant about this, but we have had some confusion from time to time when people would congratulate us on the great pasta we were going to eat at our new assignment in Nepal. And we'd have to say, excuse me, they'd say, isn't that Italy? We'd say, no, that's Naples. And it does happen from time to time that people get on the wrong flight. So Nepal is located near the top of the world. It's a tiny landlocked country. As you can see, we've got it circled there, above India, below China. And it is a fantastic place with the high Himalayas running throughout, but it's got the lowlands in the south, the mid hills, and then the high hills in the north. And it is an incredibly rich country, a rich country of 30 million people, a country that you could slice and dice about 100 different ways in terms of culture, ethnicity, belief, language, tradition. And that richness is part of what makes the experience of being in Nepal wonderful. And just to zoom in a little bit more, you'll see that we have the second map shows you exactly where this story takes place. The village of Chokre is highlighted right up on the Tibetan border near the ancient walled city of Lomantan. And this is where the magic happened. And that's just a very quick, that's the setting. And there is magic that happens there. And that's why I guess Nepal has continued to live on in my heart all these years.
So it's not Paris. There are a lot of mountains there, certainly. And Jane, I know that you've left your tracks on some of those mountains as well. Can you just briefly tell us your own, the special place in your heart that Nepal has? Oops, you have to unmute, Jane. Looks like you're both muted and unmuted. Rebecca, can you help us with that?
Am I unmuted?
Yep.
Now you're good.
Okay, thank you. Nepal has place of places in my heart. It's the people, really, Lisa. The cultures are incredibly rich and mixed and hybridized, more than any other place I've seen. But it's the ancientness of the practices of compassion and wisdom, so that every conversation feels like medicine and every path feels like a pilgrimage.
And all of this encapsulated in a place that's actually the size of the state of Tennessee.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know the lowlands the way the ambassador does. There are jungles, hot jungles, but I know those tall mountains.
So, Ambassador, I wonder if you can tell us your work there as a diplomat and how your trek, and this brings us to the start of the story, your trek that particular day led you to a change of life in terms of finding this little puppy and where you were heading at the time, because I think that whole story of where you were heading illustrates so well what your aim was in the country during your time as ambassador.
Sure. As ambassador, there's many things that we would do, of course. We were in the midst of the post-conflict era. We were helping the parties to come together, to find their way to a multi-party democracy. We were addressing the fundamental concerns about what happens with the next earthquake and how do we prepare, how do we save lives today for the disaster that's going to befall tomorrow? How do we help deal with malnutrition, every issue under the sun? There was work to be done. But one of the things that was also very important to our work as diplomats, it's about being open, it's about engaging, it's about understanding the societies in which you live. And one of our programs that I just respect so much, we have a program for the Ambassador's Cultural Preservation Fund. And it allows us to work with local communities to preserve the traditions, the iconic buildings, those things that are the heart of their communities. So we were on our way to Upper Mustang, the ancient kingdom of Lo, now the kingdom of Mustang, up near the Tibetan border. And we were going up there to look at various projects that we had both undertaken and projects that we would possibly pursue in the future. And our final destination on that trip was the ancient walled city of Lomantan, a place where adventurers just have to go at some point in their lives, up on the Tibetan border. But along the way, that's when the magic did happen in terms of meeting Loki. But it was a trip for engagement. It was a trip for outreach. It was a trip to remind ourselves that our work is more than just our policies and our pronouncements. It's about understanding. And it's also about setting aside our preconceived notions about the way a society does work or should work and trying to learn how it really works.
Okay, so you and your staff are with you, and I got the impression that this is the kind of trek that you all made fairly regularly during your tenure. And you're on foot, and it looks, I don't know if you're having a good time. It looked like you were kind of having a good time, but this is a hugely long hike. Like, how long were you on the trail?
Days. You lose track. And not being a young man, it was rigorous. It's rigorous. It really was striking to us. And our first trek, it was the same thing when we were up in the Everest region. When you are trekking at 12,000 feet, it takes a lot out of you. And it's, how am I going to put one foot after another? But you do, because you want to see what lies around that next bend. What's behind that next boulder? There's always something to grab you. And so you keep going and you experience it. But it was both the major treks that I did were among the most physically rigorous experiences I think I had as an ambassador.
So what did you find around that next bend?
One morning we had set off from the village of Sarang, and we were on our way to the ancient Logegar monastery. And as we hiked along, we saw various buildings and things that we were looking at and considering for the program. But then, as we neared the monastery, I was a little ahead of the rest of the group with a few other folks. So we said, oh, let's stop, let's catch our breath. Seemed like a good idea. And as I paused and I turned and I looked, and there on the hillside was a puppy. And the puppy almost blended into the hillside. He was the color of the dirt, of that dust that's carried on the wind there. But what made him stand out, the reason I could see him was these blue eyes, these compelling blue eyes. And they looked at me. And the puppy looked at me and he said, Dai, which means older brother. He said, Dai, come here. So of course I did. What else do you do when a puppy so politely comes and asks you to join him on his rock? And so I sat with this puppy and he climbed on my lap, Lisa, and he put his paws up here and he first licked my hands, licked me on the cheek, and he looked me in the eye and he said, Dai, you do not know this, but I am your dog. And I said, really? And he said, yes. I said, you may be right. And he said, I am. And from there, of course, one of my young officers came up to me and said, sir, what are you doing? You know, this dog isn't talking. We're at 12,000 feet. The air is thin. You know, this is, we've got to keep going, boss. But I kind of had to explain to this young man as nicely as I could to shut up. I'm having a good conversation with the dog. So we can take it from there. But that was the moment. And I will say to you that there are moments in our lives that really do touch us, that resonate, that linger. And that moment, that sense of connection with this little puppy on the side of a hill, that was powerful. And I've asked myself again and again, why did I keep telling that story? Because I told the story all the time. Whenever people would ask about the dog, sometimes I tell it even when they didn't ask about the dog. But why was that so important to me? But it was that reminder that in our life and in our work, that being open to the mysteries, to the surprises, to the beauty that awaits us around every corner, if only we're open to seeing it. These are the things that matter in life. And this is also important in diplomacy, that we are open to accepting and experiencing those things that we encounter and be able to put them into a context that allows us to find a way forward together. So anyway, it was a special moment.
Yeah. So it's interesting that, I mean, you're talking about diplomacy writ large and then very personal diplomacy too, because this wasn't your dog. There are a lot of stray dogs around in most countries around the world. You tell the story of the young man who found this dog, and maybe you can describe it, because the dog didn't belong to him, but well, kind of, sort of. He was taking care of him, and this is a young boy who lived in the mountains.
Well, and as folks who'll read the book will find, the pup is a mystery in terms of its origins. All we know is that he was found alone, tiny, near death, on the side of a trail between Sarang, where we started the day, and Chakre. And a young boy by the name of Karchung came along and he saw this puppy. And I imagine, knowing Nepalese, I can see Karchung looking at this puppy and saying, little brother, This will not do. And he picked that puppy up and he tucked him inside of his fleece and he carried him home to Chacre. And he fed the puppy. His mother made sampa, which is this wonderful barley porridge. It's the barley and the goat's yak's milk and yak's butter and good stuff all mixed together. And that puppy lived. And they brought this puppy into their home, or into their barnyard at least. And the puppy became a fixture in the village, racing around. He couldn't even walk when they found him. But within days, he was a bundle of energy. And when I met him, that was the conversation with them about the puppy and his origins. And as they tell you the story about how he'd been found and he'd been brought back, and you say, tell me, is this puppy for sale? And Karchung's uncle, who was more or less the mayor of the village, the head man of the village, looked at me and he said, Excellency, you must understand that here in Tibet, the word for dog is ki, which is also the word for happiness. So we consider dogs to be the source of happiness. So we do not sell them. We give them as gifts. And your heart melts, right? And I said, oh, geez. I said, well, tell me though, is it appropriate to give a gift in return? And they said, that's good, that's good. We talked about maybe the appropriateness of a gift of rupees. And they said, that's good. I dug in my pocket and every penny in rupees I had went into Karchung's hands and he was thrilled. And the puppy practically leapt into my arms because he had been waiting while I'd been up at the monastery. He knew I was coming back. And he leapt into my arms and he looked at me and he said, Dai, I told you. And I said, yes, and you were right. And he said, I know. And he went to sleep. And I'll just add here that my grandchildren, who I think are listening to this, are going to get on the phone later tonight and call me again and say, but Papa, you know that puppies really can't talk. And I will tell my grandchildren again, as I will tell all of our friends who are with us today, they can talk. We just have to know how to listen.
By the way, can you tell us what kind of dog Loki is?
He is a Tibetan Mastiff, purebred. He is the same dog. We saw these wonderful dogs on the walls of the palace of the king of Mustang in Lomantang, these big black and white and brown dogs with their barrel chests and their barks that reverberated across the hills and let anyone cross into their territory, boy. And they, the dogs would let you know. They were majestic dogs. These were the original big dogs that Marco Polo encountered when he went to China. And folks tell me, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but I think it's probably close to the truth that these are the dogs from which all of our other big dogs, the Newfoundlands, the St. Bernards, the Bernese, all of these are descended. And they are tremendous animals. But as Jane noted, this is an ancient breed. And they know who they are. And they are not like any dog I've ever met. And I do not consider that Loki is my dog. I just consider that Loki did me the great honor of choosing me to be his partner on this part of his journey.
So, Jane, I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about how you and Scott decided in this book the illustrations that would go into it, and especially, and maybe first off, how you decided you wanted to portray on the, if you don't see the cover right now, how you wanted to portray Loki. I think this was based on an actual picture, correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. So for the cover, I did 7 paintings just for this book. And some of them are more detailed. This was just focused on Loki, the dog. You're looking now at page, yes, there's the cover. And you see the 5 colors of the prayer flags behind him. The Tibetans print on cotton their Tibetan language, and the prayers say, may all creatures suffer less, may we all gain wisdom and compassion, may we reach our best potential. A prayer, I think, that fits any culture, any faith or religion. And so I love that the Tibetans believe that the prayers printed on those flags, when the wind passes through the flag, those wishes go out into the world. And you see on the cover, one of the wind horses called Lungta is coming right out of the flag, where many of the flags are printed with that horse. And this one is going to carry Loki's wishes to find Ambassador DeLisi's heart down in Kathmandu and somehow involve the two of them in a future together. So I wanted that rich marigold, burnt umber and sienna to shine the way light and color do in the high altitudes, but the background is the dusty rock from which the ambassador said the puppy took his color, was almost covered in dust, just those blue eyes showing.
And what about the dog's personality?
Well, Lisa, I've had animals all my life, cats and dogs all my life. And this dog is not like any dog I have ever met. When I first went to stay with the ambassador and his wife and to collaborate closely about this project, the ambassador and his wife have several dogs. Lo is not distant. He's not incredibly. The ambassador said he has presence, and that's it. It's as if he's thinking years ahead of us, and he's noble and gigantic, and he doesn't move, think, blink, or move his head like any dog I've ever known. It's quite impressive.
How did you decide to portray that within your illustrations? How did you figure it out?
Well, that the ambition we had is that I did not want to be an illustrator based on a one-to-one correspondence. For instance, if the ambassador's text says, and he was next to a river, or he was waiting, I didn't feel compelled to jot down, oh, I must do a river. On pages 18 and 19, I think, there's a section where Scott comments that the dog knows something is coming, knows that his future is about to come up that path, up that to that high elevation and find him. He anticipates. So I do have that very moment on the cover, but in the middle of the book, and I said to Scott many times, may I do what is evocative of those feelings, but not a one-to-one correspondence. And so you see a prone Buddha, a golden Buddha, lying on some trail with his head cocked against his hand, and he's smiling as a monsoon of candy falls down and splashes on him. What does that mean? It means that you have a sense that something beautiful and sweet is about to happen. And I love the idea that children will meet the illustrations and need to participate in how they mean.
Could we take a look at the other image of Jane's?
Yes, Lisa, that's page 17. You see a shrine in the foreground. And of course, in Tibet, there are hundreds of thousands of shrines. They are celebrations of a teacher, someone who taught you something that gives you better wisdom and compassion and motivation and takes away your neurotic self and replaces that self with the self of service. But look in the background, you see the mountains and you can count the layers of color. Lisa, at some point it occurred to me when I was traveling there, these mountains in their rich, vibrant, high altitude colors, which are made of rock, if I can just bring some of that rock home with me, then I can use that pulverized rock as paint. So I bought transparent, clear oil paint, like clear toothpaste. And I mixed in this rock dust from the high mountains of Nepal. And those are the only colors you see there in the background of page 17. If you look closely with a magnifying glass, when you have the book, you can see the grit of the rock, because that is Nepal.
So that's just amazing, Jane. I mean, what foresight? You didn't even know the book was coming, but it's just incredible. And so you found rock that's the sienna color, that kind of charcoal color, and the more tan color. That's
I have bags in my lap right now of each of those colors, and when the view switches back, I can show you the bag and show you some of the rocks. All of the colors of the mountains also are attached to stories about mythological time and what happened there. So I carried little bags. You can see this kind of rich orange, and I'll show you one of the rocks. Here it is. I think you can see the color, as opposed to this darker brick red color. So I have all of these rocks, and I've pulverized them into finer than sand, and I paint with them.
And how do they work as paints? I mean, did you have to use a strong density in order to get that kind of color?
You know, with this transparent oil paint, I've done a lot of work with it, and it holds them and it paints beautifully, as if I were using conventional oil paint. I mean, it's granular, but it's vibrant and stays vibrant. In fact, when you think of it, the history of oil paint is the history of deciding what will hold color, what will be fast. And those fastened colors don't come from every material. You know, the settlers in our country had to decide what plants would dye their clothing and keep the color. Certain mushrooms give yellow, for instance, but it just so happens that these rocks can be pulverized into silt and they'll never lose their color. Isn't that amazing?
It's incredible. And that
Jane, that connection that you talk about to the land and how these colors symbolize so much. I remember them telling us as we approached the Logegar Monastery, the bright swath of red through the rocks. That was the blood of the demon that had been driven from the land so that Buddhism could come to
Yep.
Nepal, right?
Yep.
I mean,
That's
fascinating connections.
At Drakmar. In fact, the little red rock that I held up came from Drakmar. This is the blood of the ogress. Yeah.
Yes, there.
So I don't know who has the original of that image, but if you swipe your fingers across it, can you feel the texture?
Yeah,
of the sand?
it's gritty. Yes.
Mhm.
And does it come off?
We've
No.
got it here right now, but yes, you can sure feel it.
Wow. Keep the grandkids away, Scott.
Well, this is why Jane was the only person that I know that could have done this book for us. And for us, I think we both feel that there was a connection here, not only with the dog, but with each other and the circumstances that brought us together and made us friends, and that led to us collaborating on the art. No one else could have done this. But
Well,
I do feel that the narrative and the art just complement each other so well.
I feel it also. And what other ambassador has chosen to use his dignity and experience to speak to the upcoming generation? For that matter, how are we ending up talking with the incomparable Rachel Maddow of public radio?
Yeah, exactly. Again, it's all karma. Yeah, it's this full circle, right?
I think, Lisa, there is an enthusiasm and a positive forward motion, a faith, if you want to call it that, to Ambassador DeLisi. And I know there is in my heart. There is a way, just as he started talking about what's around that Himalayan corner. I have climbed those high passes in terrifying snowstorms where 8 Japanese died the year before in a similar snowstorm. And they're tough places. And your guides will say, okay, for tomorrow, you just have 2 more downs and 2 more ups. And when you get to the 6th down and up that night at dinner, you say, but Narayan, he said, but I didn't want to dishearten you. We all need to stay positive.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we always have that same. Not far, not far, Your Excellency, not far.
Just
But we
near,
knew,
just near.
just near.
But that's what got you through. Um,
That's right.
to let everybody know in the audience, if you have any questions, feel free to bring them up. I may go to a couple questions if they pop up before we finish the discussion. But in the meantime, Scott, I wonder, again, as an ambassador, this is a book that you wrote for children, and Jane alluded to this a little while ago. You were in a place that where youth was very important to you. Young people were very important to you, and you were seeing the young people not being listened to at that point. I think this is one of the reasons why you decided to go on Facebook when other ambassadors hadn't. And you said that the head of the youth council was 65 years old, and so that had to go. But what's the impetus with all the books that I'm sure you could have written? What's the impetus for a children's book?
Well, first of all, I will say that to me, this isn't just a children's book. I love that it reaches children. I love that it resonates with them. But I do believe that there's something in this story that we all feel. And it doesn't have to be a lengthy tome to convey that sense of hope, that belief that we do, that if our hearts are open, if our eyes are open to the world around us, if we think about it, if we're conscious of how we choose to engage each other and engage the world, it matters and it makes a difference. And, you know, people, I wrote this story because I wanted to write this story. I had to write this story. And then people say, well, why did you do it? And then you have to come up with a reason other than just, it was in my heart. But I really do believe that there's a power here that transcends a book for just children. And I've seen adults weep as they've read the book, who have been touched deeply. And I think that's cool. And if it gets us to think about how we engage the world and how we act, that's also good. But if we get young people to think about the world around them, if we get young people open to these experiences, to hear those voices on the wind, open to hearing Loki's tale, that's good for the world. And yeah, I did. I spent a lot of time working with young people, both in Nepal and then in Uganda. And I think that was some of the most important work that I did in my final decade in the State Department. That outreach to young people, opening ourselves up, listening to them, sharing a perspective without being prescriptive, talking about what the future might hold, speaking to the values that we believed in. And I think all of that, you know, I don't want to put too much burden on this one tiny book, but you can take a lot away from it if you want to. And I certainly want to. For me, that's what this book has come to represent. It represents that culmination of belief in our values and engagement and the importance of setting aside those preconceived notions, of listening, of hearing what is really being said. Because if I was going to be an effective diplomat, I had to do all of that. And I think it's a good prescription for life as well.
And how did you, can you describe some of those lessons that you learned along the way, either in Nepal or Eritrea or Uganda, you know, the not listening part, because it sounds like you were motivated to rectify something that you had either seen or been part of?
Well, you know, it's when I went out to be an ambassador for the first time, you go to Eritrea, tough place to begin with. And they were not in listening mode in Eritrea. And it was very hard for us to have that open line of communication. And we never did get there. And that was very frustrating. And I'd ask myself sometimes if it was my failure as a diplomat that I couldn't find those right words. I just don't think the time was right there. But as you sit there as an ambassador for the first time, you ask yourself, you say, also, suddenly I am expected to lead. I'm expected to understand the vision that drives our engagement. I have to be able to tell not only our partners in Eritrea, but my own team. Mm-hmm. Why are we here? Why does this matter? And it made me think about the nature of the work. And it made me think about how I approached it and what was important to me and how I could best fulfill my oath to preserve and protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. What did all of that mean? And so you get into this conversation about our values, about the vision, about the things that matter to us in life. And I found that that's what people responded to again and again and again. And it became part of telling a story as well, because that's what diplomats are at the end of the day. We're storytellers. We're storytellers and we're salespeople. We are selling our vision of the world and of America. And we are telling us, if we tell the story the right way, people will love it. I've got a visitor here. Come here, Loki. Come here, buddy. Just 1 second, Loki. Let's see if we can. I can't see if we get him there, Loki.
There he is.
Oh, hey, buddy. You know, I will say that we've corrupted this noble beast just a little bit. For years, he would not accept a treat for love nor money. He had too much dignity. He wanted it, but he would not come for it. He is finally, as he has aged a bit, he will come and have a little treat now and then, especially if it might be peanut butter. So he's a good boy. But I'm sorry, Lisa. But so anyway,
No,
I do think there's a connection between all of these things about values and engagement and listening and the work that we do. And if we're going to achieve our goals, we can't just walk in and say, hey, we're from the United States and listen to us because we've got all the answers, because it doesn't work that way.
I wonder if you could just tie that into, and again, not to put too much of a burden on the book, but could you tie it into a bit of a reading that you could do for us from the book? I think you had a couple of paragraphs that would point.
I did, and it goes very much to what Jane was talking about as well. And Loki has just settled down at my feet now. It's the perfect picture, the perfect setting for it. This was as Loki had just encountered Kar-Chung. They say that those winds that blow across the Tibetan plateau carry the hopes and wishes that are written on the prayer flags onward to the heavens. I don't know if that is true, but I like to think that it is. So did the little puppy, who hoped that his truest dreams might be carried on those winds. He had not inscribed them on a flag, but he hoped that the winds would carry his dream nonetheless. It might surprise you that a puppy so young could have a dream, but he did. He might have been tiny, but this puppy knew deep in his heart that he would somehow find a home. And he knew with a certainty that came from deep within his being that the borders of his world would extend even farther than a Himalayan golden eagle could see from its lofty mountain eyrie. The pup did not really know that a larger, bigger world lay beyond the Tibetan plateau that was his home. He was, after all, just a little tiny pup. But something told him that his destiny lay beyond the mountains of the plateau, and it made him long for the future to come. This dream might have seemed too big for such a little pup to dream. But fortunately, our dreams are not measured by the size of our bodies, but by the size of our hearts. And when the winds start to blow as they did that day, it's okay to allow the hopes in our hearts to grow wings. And that is what the puppy did.
Would it have been wrong, do you think? Maybe this is really based on your personal interests and passion for Loki, to leave the dog there. Would that have been wrong?
I don't know if there's a right or a wrong about it. He would have lived as many dogs do on the plateau. It would have been fine. He would have been fine, I'm sure. Probably shorter life, a rougher life, but he would have been in the setting that he loved and that he felt at home in, I think. And I will say, I've met countless strays, and I don't generally say, oh, I'm going to take this one home and take that one home. I'm going to save the world. I'm going to save every puppy I meet. I've never done. But this moment resonated in a way, and every step that led me to saying yes seemed right. And it seemed powerful. And, I mean, it does sound crazy. People say, but he's a dog, Scott. But it's more than that. And there is a connection. It does feel, the first night that we were together on the trail. Yeah, he had slept in a barnyard his entire life. That first night, as we lay on the trail and as we slept on the trail, we were in a little tea house, a hard wooden platform. I put down my mat, I put down my sleeping bag, and Loki crawled up on top of it and he snuggled in right here, right under my, right on my shoulders, head right here. And it was like he said, yep, this is it. So right or wrong, I don't know, but I think if I had left him behind, I would have always regretted it. And I think he would have too, but you'll have to ask him.
I think that might answer the question that Elena in our audience asked, but maybe there's another story you can tell us. She says, can you provide a specific example of something that Loki did that led to an insight? Give us another story.
This dog, it was the reminder when I would try to get him to come in or to do anything, right? It was kind of like, no way, dude, I choose what I do. And it was, if you want to carry that over into the work we do or how we engage our kids or our grandkids or anything else, it is once again that reminder that we are all independent beings. We all have our desires, our thoughts, our beliefs, and we have to find a way to work through things together. Not just with the boss, not just the ambassador saying, hey, it's time, okay, it's time to come in. His Excellency has spoken. Loki could care less what my titles were or what my role was. You had to find the way to engage. And that's been a true story with him forever. But we have found our path together. And for me, that's all right.
He's not so easy, is he, Scott? Just
No, he isn't. You asked my wife Leah, when Loki was a puppy, he was the closest thing to almost a feral beast that we'd ever brought into our home. He was wild and crazy, and he was happy to be part of a pack. He loved having the other dogs. He finally had a family, but at the same time, trying to bring him into that community, though it's funny, he could be crazy at times, but if he came near a child, he just do whatever you want to me. He loved other kids and he loved other dogs.
So
but no, he was not easy, but no good relationship is ever easy. So.
And he made the transition well to Virginia.
He made the transition well enough to Virginia during the summer months there. He loves to be outdoors, but he finally said during those summer months, there are times I hear this thump as that big paw hits the screen door out back saying, I want air conditioning now. Yeah, and we go, yes, Your Excellency, yes. We call him the Prince of the Mountains. Yeah, and he sits up on this high hill in the backyard and he wanders down and says, yes, it is now time for me to come in and get some cool air. Thank you very much. But when it's cold as it has been, oh my goodness, I can't, trying to get him to come in. It's kind of like, dude, it's 20 degrees. This is my weather. I'm not moving.
Another question, let's see, from Alice. Were you a dog person before Loki found you? And you have other dogs, but they're not from other countries.
We are been a dog person all my life, though there was a period when I first joined the Foreign Service when we were dogless for a while. We then made up for it with an abundance of cats and dogs. And that continued. And in Nepal, we arrived in Nepal with 3 dogs. We lost our eldest while we were there. In fact, not too long before I met Loki. And she was a wonderful little bichon, the bichon frise that we had bought in South Africa, actually. She was energetic and crazy, would leap up into your arms. We called her Gabriella the circus dog, Gabby. She's named after Gaborone, Botswana, where we were living. But after she passed, we thought maybe we'd consider getting another dog, but maybe not right away. And I think my wife was pretty sure that if we did, we'd get another little white dog like Gabby. So imagine Leia's surprise when on this trek, and Leia did accompany me initially, but she got altitude sickness and had to go down early, unfortunately. we went up too fast, faster than we did on our first trek where we both did fine. But so I didn't have Leia there to guide me properly. And so I'm sure she would have liked a little white dog, and I came home with this guy. But I will say, in my defense, I did promise we'd find a home for him if it didn't work out. And I brought him home wearing a red bandana. And who can resist a puppy with blue eyes and a red bandana on first meeting? We went all out, and look, he was on his best behavior when he first met Leia. It didn't always continue, but now he's a very good boy.
There's a question for Jane. I think it was for, yeah. Jane, you been to Nepal before meeting Scott, and what brought you two together as an author and illustrator? How'd you find each other?
I had been to Nepal before. Luckily, my internal guidance took me to India when I was a young woman, and then took me repeatedly more and more north until I found Nepal. It was like a homing instinct. Go there, go there. I didn't know much, but I found what I needed. So I had made a documentary, and you are the voice of that documentary. People can go on YouTube and look up A Gift for the Village, which won the Motion Picture Academy of Arts and Sciences laurels. And we were so proud that you were our voice, Lisa. Thank you. And so we were taking that film to show the then king of Western Nepal, Raja Jigme Parwar Bista. And we had a generator that we had to carry to be able to show a documentary. And he had to first screen it, and he did, and he approved, he loved it. The prince and the princess loved it, and they decreed that on July the 17th that year, about 11 years ago, we were going to have the whole walled village of Lo watch, which they did. And it was projected against an ancient mud brick wall, the side of his palace. It was amazing. And on the way back from that surreal, beautiful, cultural, cross-cultural, fantastic celebration, because that film really celebrates the bridge that is The Gift for the Village, a painting I did of an Amchi healer, Sampanawang, whose prayer is the first page of our book, wonderfully. On the way back in that undulating moonscape, there was a little man far, far in the distance, like a tiny piece of motion. Is that a man? Is it a Yeti? What is that way out there? And it was a runner who eventually, an hour later, up and down, found us and handed us a beautiful embossed envelope that was an invitation from the American ambassador in Kathmandu he had heard about the film, and would we please bring it to the embassy to show. And Scott put on a beautiful event, and there were, doctors and sculptors and all kinds of artisans and artists there, and historians and scholarly people. And the next night he had me and one of the filmmakers, Jenna Swan, back. I think, am I back? Yes, I think we knew that we had a good collaborative energy together then.
Scott,
And it was so much fun to talk about the power of the connection from the film. Jane said it builds bridges, right? Art can transcend cultures, and it can be a tremendously important tool in building these connections between people and between societies. And I think we saw that play out so much in A Gift for the Village. And I think Jane and I both hope that it plays out a bit in this book as well, because there's elements in the book that I hope people come away with understanding the love that I think both of us feel for Nepal and for its people.
In when he was drinking a glass of wine in a poor little shop late at night, Leonardo wrote to himself, I think that the arch is the most beautiful architectural shape because it's two weaknesses that come together to make a strength. I would tell that to my students when I talk at Virginia Tech, and as they would write it down, tell them that I knew they were going to use it as a pickup line for the next date. And they would laugh, but I really mean it culturally, seriously, that I think, you know, there's so much worry, as there should be, about cultural appropriation, about taking what you don't have the depth of familiarity and understanding to use in your art. And I am very bold to make bridges to other cultures, but I have walked literally to find the meaning of what I paint about. And so there's something else, Lisa, that is the better iteration of cultural appropriation. And I think it's called a cultural bridge. And it's a form of artistic diplomacy, if I may be so bold, that I try to do. And to match Scott's big heart for understanding that we are all trying at this moment of history, especially, to re-knit ourselves as Americans back into this world and the dialogue that we will all need with one another.
Well, and I think one of the things that really Jane and I both really value about the book as well, though, is that it was published in Nepal. And the publishing house, Vajra Books in Nepal, the gentlemen there are just our heroes. I mean, they're just such wonderful men.
Brilliant.
And they are, and the fact that they took this narrative and they saw it for what it was, and they saw the love, and they took Jane's tremendous illustrations, and they helped to meld the two together. And their assessment was really important to us because they're Nepali. And I wanted them to feel that this book was theirs too, and that it was of their country. And I think that they did. I think that it's resonated. I hope it's resonated well there. But that was the effort, at least. And to have that collaboration is all. That also mattered tremendously, I think. You know, so Jane, would you agree? Or would you agree?
Yes, I mean, when we worked with the designers and the publishers at Vajra Books and Kathmandu, they were our partners. They made suggestions. We would give them, for instance, in terms of the illustrations, a whole platter, a banquet of images, and they could harvest from those what seemed most appropriate. And then they suggested that to us. So we were not martinets telling them what to do on each page. It wouldn't have been any more appropriate to do that than it would have been for Scott to boss low key. So we accept, you know, equal partners. And I'm so proud of them and to know them, and can't wait to return to Nepal and thank them, because I feel like they've grown to be our friends and our family. It's an intimate thing to interweave text and images and to do it internationally. In fact, they designed it and they sent it to their printing partners, a venerable press in New Delhi, India, where I raised my children when they were very young. And so this whole international effort, concluding with this beautiful object, the silk cover, the embossed cover, the gold print on it, the nice textured pages, in a time when we are all lacking touch and connection and travel. This book is something you can hold that gives you hope for all of those riches in our future. Touch and travel.
I want to thank you so much. We have to wrap it up, unfortunately, but I'm so glad you two found each other and created this partnership and this kind of triangular relationship with this wonderful place that brought you together and brought us this book. And can we have one more shot of low key there, Scott?
Let me get Kiki. Come here, bud. Can you say hello? Let's get my hand out of there. Oh, he's just gonna lay down and okay, yeah.
Oh, you can see the blue eyes though. That's wonderful.
Well, these days they're gold. They did not stay blue.
They're
They
shiny.
did change, but they are a penetrating golden green. Depending on his mood, they shift a little bit, but they're the eyes that are full of wisdom. And he has, as they say, he has the marks, the four eyes, the chestnut eyebrows that we were told are the mark of wisdom. And so I defer to his wisdom. I thank you, Lisa, for being with us today and helping us to share this. And Jane, it's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Lisa, thank you so much. I have the highest admiration, as I know everyone does, and to the library. Thank you so much for having us. And Scott, your voice is like John Quincy Adams in Amistad. You
Well,
stand up and you tell the truth.
Listen, and if any of our friends in the audience, if there are other questions, just email us. We're on Facebook, our emails, we'll share our emails and we answer them. Right, Jane?
Always.
Okay.
Okay, Rebecca, I think we're going to turn it over to you. If anybody wants to know how they can get the book or anything else, then Rebecca, thank you. And Scott, Jane, thank you. Loki, thank you. And everybody who is joining us this evening, thank you all.
Namaste.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. So if you would like to purchase a copy of the book, and it would be a signed copy, we would love for you to get it through Rouseabout Books, which is a local independent bookstore located here in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. And I have put that link in the chat and I will send it out to you afterwards. And if you are in Delaware and you have a Delaware Library card, we will have a copy in the Delaware Library system by the end of the week. And that link is in the chat as well. So I would like to invite everyone to unmute yourselves, applaud, say thank you. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay.
Right, 2 for 1.
Thank you. So everyone, thank you, and have a wonderful evening. We hope to see you soon.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks, Sam. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you. Good night.